Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. I hope you are well, and this is the place where we are talking about our lives, our physical lives, our spiritual journey, and especially understanding our lives, the challenges that we face. And sometimes this looks like we are stuck in life, hitting roadblocks along our spiritual journey. And we know what that's like. It really throws us off balance. And the longer we stay in these sort of just not feeling 100%, and we're not feeling that we're kind of moving forward, we know what happens. Our physical health, we start going down a bit of a rabbit hole. We don't feel well. And it might mean also that our mental health takes a turn, where we start feeling more anxious, more stress. And the longer we stay in those sort of periods of stuckness, not feeling 100%, it really does take its toll. Now I'm here to help you remember and focus on the bigger me. Now that bigger me is your higher self. Now that's the bit that's intuitive. It's cognizant. It hears, it feels, and it sees. Now that's the part of you that had a plan when you came in here, and it knows why you're here. Now, just to understand that part a little bit, you might actually know it by other names, and the soul, the inner voice, the subconscious. You know, these are the bits, whatever modality you've used or whatever feels comfortable for you, that's the bit that really knows and has your back. Now here's the thing, how do we access that part? Because what I have found, and this is what's happening in the shift on our planet, when we access that part, the bigger you, it will show you. You know, it heals you. It takes a lot of the guesswork out, and it really loves you. And in my work, I'm helping others and reminding them, and that goes two ways, helping me, reminding me too, that we need to trust this part. Now, obviously, when life is going good and the journey is moving along, we feel good. But of course, when we hit the challenges and we hit roadblocks and things in our lives that throw us off balance, this really, really matters. Because this is the difference of sitting in those prolonged periods where we don't know what's going on. And we kind of work our way through, or we suffer through them. And we have a whole set of circumstances and, for another word, symptoms or things that are happening either emotionally, mentally, or physically in our lives. So what do we do when we hit something in our lives that throws us off balance? So if this is something that you're interested in, and just sort of how to access that part of you, the higher self, the bigger me, then please do hit the subscribe button now. And if you'd like to know a little bit more and how to access that part, you might want to visit the website, where there are free resources, and just to get your free guidebook where you can actually speak to your higher self using the pendulum, and all the wealth of information, and also 3 very, very specific areas that you can get so much information. And just like what we're talking about, accessing that part, because it does help us, it navigates us in our present life. Now, in this topic, we are looking at something of how to recognize a twin flame connection. Now, if you've hit on this, you're either interested in it, or you're going through it, or you might feel that you recognize someone on a different sort of level, a spiritual inner sort of sense about a person. And I guess it's not until you go through something like this that you then start to see these kind of blogs, posts, because if you're anything like me, I literally read and tried to gobble up as much information to try to help me when I had just met somebody that kind of changed everything in my present life. So in this podcast, we are going to talk about how do we recognize that twin flame connection. And I'd have to admit, this is a subject that is close to my heart, and I kept private for nearly 10 years. And I'd have to admit that one of the reasons why is because I didn't understand it. It was one of those things I didn't understand or even knew how to articulate when I'd met this person. Just to give you a little bit of a time frame, it was kind of a couple of years before I really started my spiritual journey. And I had no idea why, or I didn't understand why I felt familiar with this person. But all I kind of knew is that when I was with them, I felt happy. I could be myself. I felt alive. And it was just in a way that I hadn't experienced before. But this is the thing as well. Now, when they weren't in my life, I felt like I kind of was in a black room. I couldn't find the light, figuratively speaking. And I couldn't work out why this person evoked even these kind of sort of emotions and feelings in me. So for me personally, this person sort of kind of appeared before I started a spiritual awakening. Now that's really key with this whole topic. Something is going on with you spiritually. And we're going to get into sort of how to recognize and some of the things to look for. But in my experience, and probably what you're experiencing right now, is something spiritually is happening. Now, for me, in terms of what happened, I started my Reiki journey. And that was around sort of 2010. And then in 2017, I started my journey to read the Akashic records for others. And I was doing case studies. And of course, I asked this person if they'd be a case study. And this is where I didn't quite realize just the power of this and all the accumulation over the years of what I could feel, sense, and had a certain level of cognizance about this person. I'd seen it all in the Akashic records, because what the records did for me, it confirmed to myself that my real life experiences with this person was not a figment of my imagination. Now, subsequently, over the years, working and other people having their own Akashic record readings, this was, especially this part, when they decided to look at somebody from a spiritual perspective, not delving into their records, but understanding from their perspective, that it was also met with a profound recognition, and that validated their own experience. So maybe you're listening to this podcast, or you might have come across an article and you're not sure, or you sense that you have perhaps met somebody that could be like this, or could be someone that would fit what is termed as a twin flame. I just think it helps if we know, well, what does even a twin flame look like? Now, there's a lot of information out there. And I've really kind of put this kind of together from my own perspective. And this is what I would just ask you to do, is to kind of take this and let it sit with you what feels right. If it doesn't feel right, then let it go. But if it does feel right and this does resonate with you, then this will certainly help you to get a sort of sense of self. Because what I've understood, what the twin flame connection looks like, is pretty much known as the twin soul. Now, this sometimes can be that this person mirrors you. There is also like distinctive patterns associated. Now, this is the bit which I couldn't understand until several years later, that I felt periodically drawn to that person. Then I equally felt a pulling away. Now, either one of the you pull away, or it's kind of, and I know in my case, I just couldn't see that person. It was almost like too much. I had to digest and almost come to another sort of realization. And during that, a sort of a spiritual thing was going on within. Now, this is what I noticed, that the separation periods felt like my world had fallen apart. They were excruciating. They were even painful. And it was confusing, because you might find that this person shows you many things: friendship, they might be teaching you, they might be a nurturer, they even might be your lover, they might not be any of those things, but they are someone that you feel on a very deep level. Now, I know that it's often popularized as being solely romantic. Um, However, I've come across this whole kind of twin-like pulling and sort of coming together and sort of moving away from each other, and from various degrees. And they haven't necessarily been in sort of like lover or sexual type relationships. Now, this is the kind of thing where I'm going to say, I'm going to leave that to you, as to how that feels and what you get a sense. What I get a sense around that is that it's not necessarily just about being with someone of the opposite sex. Now, I have written an article, and perhaps we might even talk about it on another subsequent podcast, where there's such a thing called contracts. Now, these contracts are energetic ties that pull us together lifetime after lifetime. Now, for me, in my situation, it wasn't until quite near to sort of like the 10-year mark that I'd realized, and this was a perspective I had from the Akashic Records, that I was in a contract. So, there's a little bit of a pulling and throwing. Now, I'm not saying that everyone that's in that is in a contract, but I definitely can see that sometimes there's a little bit of a pattern here, that there is that thing that you feel that you've got to be together, and they're not necessarily at times can be the most sort of well-rounded out relationships. At their worst, they can be quite toxic. You might want to have a look at that sort of written article. I will put that down below, and like I said, we might actually talk about that in a bit more depth. But for now, just to kind of really understand that the twin flame, this whole sort of thing, can actually be excruciating, can be quite painful. Now, it also has the other polarity, where this connection can be beautiful. It's almost like the flip side of this, where there's almost like clarity and a soul purpose, a coming together, a surrendering and deep love, and a letting go and a bringing together. But like I did say, and I do still echo, that they can be also difficult, hellish, toxic, and deeply hurtful. And that is because of what it's teaching you, what the experience is teaching you. There will be some growth, there will be something spiritual going on, and we're going to sort of look and identify those areas. I also want to put in that it's worth mentioning that each person's experience is their own. I just think when we try to compare it, it can get really messy, and we can get quite confused, and whatever phase that you're in with this soul connection is going to play out uniquely. This is another thing. This is when we begin to trust that part, the bigger me, that inner voice, because there was always a part that knew that this was more than what was going on right now, that this was something on a soul level. So let's talk about some of those things of how to recognize. Let's sort of get a sense of where you are in your spiritual journey and just where you are perhaps karmically with this person. And so that you can get a sense for yourself who this person is and whether or not intuitively, not by a podcast or an article telling you that this person is, but you can just connect with that part of you that is going to help you to get that recognition. So one of the first things that's quite distinguishing is, having spoken to others over the years and with my own experience, and you might be able to put your experience in with this, is that they feel familiar to you. Now, what do I mean by that? At some level, this person just feels familiar. It might feel that you've met them before, but you don't know where, but you notice there is a resonance at a deep level. It might even be their face. You instantly recognize their face, even though you've not seen them before. Then this is what happens. The more you know that person, there's synchronicities. Now, what I mean by this is that you have a similar timeline. You might even have had the same experiences. And then because of this familiarity, you feel completely yourself in their company. You don't try to change them, and they certainly don't try to change you. It's like there is such a familiarity there that you are at one. You feel at peace. Now, that doesn't mean to say that they will irritate you, or because there are those times, and I'm not talking about a surface irritation, I'm talking about a deep mirror that that person can show you that can really kind of get under your skin. So, does that resonate with you? Does that person feel familiar with you? Now, I'm going to add another experience that others have told me about, that I had experienced. You might have dreamt about this person before you met them. Has that happened with you? You just had a dream, sleeping dream, or just in a kind of light dream, you just almost saw this person. And you know their face. So they feel very familiar to you. Now, closely following this is the The next thing to look out for is, what is a soul connection? So let's define this a little bit. This connection feels different from your other close friends and families. It's almost like this person, like we talked about, maybe even had dreams prior to meeting them, they will just show up in your life, and it's almost like everything conspires that you've just met at that time and you are instantly drawn to them. But here's the thing, that there is something different, that straight away that this person is special. And what we mean by a soul connection, it's deeper. It's not just a physical. You know, if it is the opposite sex, it's not just sexual. If it's a family member, friend, it's not just like your other friends. There's something within you. It's a soul connection. It's deep. There's an inner knowing. Again, let's just talk about that inner knowing, that part of you that's so intuitive. That goes ping. It's almost like, there you are. Now, this is interesting because you might not be aware what that really means. It kind of took me almost 10 years to even understand what the soul connection was. I didn't even have an articulation at that time. But I just knew something moved inside. It's that part, it's that inner voice. It's that cognizance. It's just that I just knew. Nobody had to tell me. I didn't have to go away and find an answer about it. This is something that internally you will get a sense of. So has that happened to you? Have you felt, seen the difference between that particular person? And it might mean that you've got close people around you. We can have soul connections with many people. Again, this is an internal thing. But that person feels different. So here's the other thing. Now, I kind of put this as they bring up codependent or needy behavior. Now, what do I mean by that? This again is sort of something from my own experience and sort of collated over the years of speaking to others, is that once you connect with that person, it feels like you need to be with them. It kind of upsets the apple cart. And when I say codependency may develop, it kind of feels like you can't do without them. And again, how this sort of, works its way out and shows its way out is going to be different for you. This might happen over a period of time. It might happen in moments that you're feeling with them. For some, there's been a difficulty and an issue with distance. It's almost like you've met them, maybe the once or twice that they were in your life, and then they completely disappear. And I've spoken to people and I've seen how heartbroken this is when those bits that you're not with them can be absolutely excruciating. So the other flip side to that is that you stick like glue. It means that you kind of do everything with that person. You almost become one. And then that becomes so intense, one of you will pull away for no apparent reason. Now, this may seem to kind of almost have a pattern of blowing hot and cold. Might be that one of you doesn't seem to acknowledge it quite as a soul connection the way the others do. And that can be quite confusing and almost a little bit hurtful. It's almost like one of you kind of knows and the other one does, or they're not voicing it the same way. And this can be quite sort of painful. But there is that whole mixture of needing to be with them, perhaps difficulty of being with them, you've been stuck together, and then all of a sudden, for no reason, it's like you need to pull away. So, does that resonate with you? Has that happened to you? You know, and how have you felt within that? And this is kind of where the next part is really quite sort of, for me, was quite telling. What happens in those bits where you kind of feel quite apart? So I kind of put this bit together as being part of the spiritual awakening. Because what that looks like, what's going on with you, is that you are becoming aware of yourself. There is something waking up. There's that part of you, that's the bigger me, that is intuitively aware of things. It almost sort of catapults you into going on your spiritual journey. Now, the other person might be going on a spiritual journey, or they might even not be. They might be completely doing something completely opposite to you. But now, what this looks like in the physical, because this is why I call it the spiritual kind of awakening, because you've got this spiritual side going on, but you've also got this physical being together in the physical life, is that person can show you both night and day, both exquisite happiness and intense darkness. So here's where I kind of relate it to the spiritual awakening, because they might be showing you parts that you kind of need to work on. It might be triggering a consciousness, a self-awareness, a spiritual growth, a soul level awareness. And that might be together as the union, or it might be completely separate. So there's a lot that goes on with this, and in my own personal spiritual awakening, that was pretty much sort of learning to connect with source energy, trusting that part, understanding and hearing my higher self. And all through the years, I was beginning just to sort of trust what I was beginning to sense and understand about this person. I personally felt that in my case, this person was waiting for me. And I didn't understand why. I didn't know that. Nobody told me that. But this bigger me kind of knew that there was a waiting for. And kind of, I got to sort of like the year 10 of being together in this kind of physical relationship, where the Akashic Records, where I, especially when started entering into that in 2013, 2017, I was then reading for other people. And this opened up not just for myself, but for others. This is where, for me, the physical union, where we were able to release the contract, understand, or I was able just to understand a little bit more about that union, that in my situation, this very special person transitioned and died. So I was able to sort of get a clear awareness and gratitude that I was able to meet this person that really kind of helped me along my spiritual journey. So what does all this kind of mean? Well, from a soul perspective, this can be part of a spiritual journey that just comes along and kind of takes us by surprise, because it's also very physical. You're with that person in the physical life, but it's also in the spiritual awakening and that spiritual journey that you can be sort of really thrown. So is that something that you have noticed? Is that something that has happened to you? Have you become aware at this point in your journey And again, for me, this took years. So depending on where you are, you might get a little bit of sense, a little bit of level of orientation of what's going on in your physical life and why this is actually a catalyst into helping you in your spiritual journey. You see, from a soul perspective, when we come here, we have a plan. And that plan might be that you've karmically met back up with a person. And in my situation, that person I instantly recognized. They also was here to help me to grow. And that's something that you might be aware of with this person. Now, what that looks like in the physical, they get under your skin. You might feel a little bit needy with that person. You know, you might have these torturous separation periods, but within those you'll grow. You know what's called the push and pull. I didn't even understand that. When I was in those, I hated the separations, but I also was like relieved that there was those moments where I could sort of kind of spiritually readjust. You might find that you've got similar situation going on. You know, it's very easy to become overwhelmed and disheartened and even resentful when dealing with this. But this is where we've got an opportunity to gain clarity and to grow. This is where we tap into our inner wisdom. This is where we can draw strength from our guides, our spirit guides. It might be that you're connected with them or with one, with your angel. Because you know, before we came here, we'd ask them that they would guide us and help us. And they are supporting you every step, even the bits that don't look nice, even the bits where we feel completely thrown off balance. When we start to access the bigger me, this is the higher self. This is where the inner knowledge, the inner wisdom will help you to understand the nature of this connection. And it also helps us to readdress the balance. Because this is a thing, there is no one outside of ourselves that can give us the true happiness. I learned that one. Is that something that you're learning? You know, the people that we've got in our lives, you know, they're there. And I've seen that not only through the past life regression, but in the Akashic records. We tend to meet and connect with the same souls. And, you know, we're helping each other along the way. But nobody can give us that inner peace and that inner happiness. This is where, especially this kind of connection, helps us to stand in our own inner authority and our own power. Now, I've seen that in different stages and different levels, but in my own, through just the linear of 10 years, I had reached a point from codependency and needing that person to when I was able, before that person transitioned, that I was able to love that person where they could have been on the other side of the globe. It's like the connection, I didn't need the physicality of it. And this is where that spiritual growth and that connection and what we said that we would help each other with. So I hope this has kind of given you a little bit of a perspective about this connection. You know, they are going to feel very familiar to you. And if that's happened, trust where that has come from. Or you might need to just readdress, where did that come from? Was it the bigger me? Is it that part of you? And closely following that is the soul connection. That is an internal, cognizant, intuitive knowing, feeling, seeing, and hearing. There's going to be growth in there. That's why I called it sort of like a mixed codependent and needy behavior, because that can be really tricky in the physical life. That can be hellish, toxic, but it also can be a very beautiful thing. And it depends on where you are and how many lifetimes that you have been with that person. And sometimes we do several lifetimes to try and work this whole thing out. We said that we would try and help each other, and sometimes that can keep on going. And that's why we recognize them. But of course, there has to be some level of spiritual level of growth in there. And that really, for me, set it apart. That wasn't just an abusive relationship where there was absolutely nothing going on. There was, and it kind of felt a little bit different having a relationship where there can be things going on that don't feel so good, and perhaps the cognizance and the awareness comes later. Versus, and this is just a personal perspective, I'll leave you to sort of put your own take on that. Whereas with this, even though there were difficult periods and a lot of all this stuff going on, I grew with it spiritually. And that opened really that bigger me, that soul perspective, so that I was able to move forward. So where are you with yours? Where are you in your road, your journey, in your awareness with this person? I hope this has helped you to sort of recognize, the twin flame connection, because there is a lot of information out there, and we just have to sift through it and see what resonates and feels right with ourselves. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if this is something that you'd like to listen into, more areas in our physical lives and the challenges and all the things that kind of throw us off, if you would like to listen in, then please hit the subscribe button. And don't forget, if you'd like some free resources, and get the free guidebook on how to speak with your higher self using the pendulum. That's a very powerful tool and a way that we can hear that part. So for now, do take care, and I look forward to speaking with you very soon. Bye for now.